Here to answer those policy-ish deep dives.
So our general plan calls for the city of Fremont to become strategically urban. And so we've planned for many years for new growth, but we recognized that we needed to grow in a smart way around transit. And so our long-range plans call for most of our housing growth to happen around our BART stations and around our transit corridors. So that's one of the things we've done to plan for population increase. Now, around affordable housing, we're really a leader, I think, in incorporating affordable housing needs into our rules and regulations so that all market rate development either builds affordable housing or pays fees to the city that help us build affordable housing. And we also now have a rule where new employers who come, new construction that's commercial or industrial, also contributes money to help build affordable housing in the future.
But a lot of the reason people came to Fremont years ago was to get a house. And that now we're talking about housing. And it's not necessarily a house. It's you're sharing walls with other people. It's much denser. It changes the feel of a community. I suspect it brings the stress level up higher or something like that. But what was once a quiet crossroads is now, was it strategic urban? Mm-hmm. So how is that affecting things?
So I think it's important to remember that every choice we make has ripple effect impacts. Fremont is the fourth largest city in the Bay Area, and so we need to think of ourselves as a city now. And so that means that the choices that we make around things like housing, if all we build are single-family houses, then that means there's going to be more commuting, there's going to be more traffic, there's going to be impacts on climate change because there's going to be more driving. Mm-hmm. That a single-family home is not as energy efficient as a multiple-family home when built to code. So you have all of these impacts that keep rippling out. And so, yes, it means that the character of the community is changing, that we are becoming more urban. But I think that also has positive impacts in terms of how the possibility of providing affordable housing. I think that we're way behind where we need to be there, but it's easier to do when you're building multi-household units. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I know, Sanjeev, you have some expertise in that because you've been a developer of what we call dense housing for a while now, high-density housing. Yes. But you don't believe that you cannot create a nice community feel or even luxurious living around that kind of high-density environment. You think it's possible to do both?
Yes, it is. And I think it's quality of life and experience that people get living in the community is critical. So if you have just housing, let's say dense housing, let's say condos or apartments, but do not have retail nearby or right underneath, that makes it easy for someone to say, I can go down the elevator and get a cup of coffee or food or, little things that you need for your life without having to drive out. Then the quality of life becomes richer if you have that kind of experience around it, right? So to integrate those experiences that makes it desirable for people to live within the community without having to venture out too far out is important. Now, along with that, with the density comes the ability to make it a little more affordable by nature because it costs less to live, let's say, in a condo than in a single-family home, right? But along with that, I think, is to consider other stratas of affordability in terms of dedicating some affordable units rather than to say we're going to just give an in lieu fee. So I am a big believer in that to a lot extent because I personally live in a community, not here but in Sunnyvale, but that has a rule that you have to dedicate units. You don't have an option to give in lieu fee. And people have a misconception that affordable people living in the community kind of bring down the feel of the community. It's totally untrue. Affordable today is more like, I had heard from one of the planning commissioners saying it's more like a single income can become an affordable family because it comes under moderate income, right? Mm-hmm. So affordability is a big issue, and I think to make that affordable housing as part of the community is really going to enrich the community so every strata of people can live together and live like a great community so people don't have to commute far off. Thank you.
I think one of the things that you really need to keep in mind, and we hear so often from our community that's critical, is the education. So having partnerships with the school district and looking at how we're planning and rolling out in terms of the growth so that we can adapt to some of the changes that we're seeing. We're very excited to have our first new elementary school in 25 years, as well as a joint use park that's going to be coming in next year. And we also are working on other developments. The other thing that's important to note is that we as a city are really excited to have our first master park plan that's going to be under study for the first time in our cities. I think it's been 22 years since the last update, as well as an Arbor Tree Foundation grant that we're able to then go through and do a citywide inventory. When you talk about what makes the community lovely to live in, trees and nature is a great piece of it. And partnerships with also East Bay Regional Parks and having some of the first campgrounds in the Bay Area. It'll allow people then to be able to explore the outdoors and to live more in the community, not just in their homes.
I remember when the A's were going to build a stadium down here. You remember that?
Yes.
That would have been a game changer, wouldn't it?
Literally.
It really
Yeah.
would. But still, when we're talking about all of this affordability and the housing, we hear that all around the Bay Area, all right? And I hear it from the elected officials and the planners, okay? Everybody. Then I talk to people out here, and they've got their house, and the value of that house is going up through the roof, and their children are going to be in Tracy, commuting here. So how do you bridge that gap? Because that, when you say affordable housing, that is somebody's children, and if they don't make that cut, the next stop is on the other side of the Altamont Pass. How do you deal with that?
Well, yeah, Fremont, what used to be the end of the line for the BART station, that's all we had here. And most of these cities were, suburban communities, where you had to drive a car, and it's not very well connected. The public transit is not very good. And so now we have to undo all these years of policies, decades of, I don't want to say mismanagement, but just poor planning as far as transportation is concerned. And now we're trying to do it now. It's much more difficult, it's much more expensive, and it takes a lot more effort. And so the biggest thing is we need to make people feel comfortable with public transit. So they should be able to get on one bus, and it should connect to the BART, the Caltrain, the VTA. It all needs to be one big agency. And so I think if we can make people be able to live here, work here, and provide a space, that's the best way to handle that.
Well, getting more people onto transit and improving transit connectivity, that's key for sure. But for now, a lot of people are in their cars, and you're getting more and more cars all the time because apps like Waze, they're directing people onto local Fremont streets, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, how are you handling that? Because that is probably not going to change anytime soon. And as I do my surveys,
Change for the better.
Yes. People talk about traffic congestion as one of the top problems in Fremont. So what can be done in the short term?
So in the short term, some of the efforts that we are looking at is how we do the planning and the rollout, whether it's from people movement to goods movement. We have been partnering with companies like Waze, as well as with our public works, to allow people to look at some of the smart corridors. So everything from looking at update our signaling and for traffic lights. So for example, those have not been updated in our city since the invention of the iPad. So it's been about at least 15 years since some of that has been done. The other things that are really important when we talk about getting around Fremont, we strongly believe in the safety for our community and having safe routes to schools. So we were one of the few cities where our city, as well as the school district, came together to do an audit of all 42 schools. And during this past summer, we implemented a lot of the simple solutions. If you're driving around Fremont, you may see some of the new flashing cross signals, as well as the restriping. That makes it easier for people to note our children are being there. And working in partnership with that is something that we were very excited to implement. Also, about 2.5 years ago, it's something that we implement when it comes to green and climate awareness. Fremont got brighter 2.5 years ago, and that's to help to see the streets, and we moved to LED lights, and it's not just the people being smarter. So it's about being efficient.
We've got to touch on homelessness because that population has grown quite a bit in the last 2 years. You're currently at what, 600 people unhoused?
608
Okay.
that we know of.
And
Yes,
many of
on a
them
one-day
sleep
point
in,
in
there are
time.
also people in RVs, sleeping in cars, right? What kind of solutions are you providing? We, of course, have reported extensively on the Navigation Center, but it was met with quite a bit of resistance in the community. So I like to hear how you plan to tackle that in a way that takes community input into consideration, but also clearly addressing the need that's growing every day.
Well, I'll go ahead and step up on this one. I think first off, for me personally, I've said it before, it's something that I could not ignore. When I came into office, it was something that people noted and we've seen in the community, and it's something, homelessness is not something new. It was not something recently invented, it's something that's been in our community. But the impact and the growth of it is something that we've seen a tremendous amount. And we have grown by about 27% since our last point in time count, which actually is significantly lower than most of the other surrounding cities in Alameda County. Some of the conscientious efforts that we've made include, instead of having a warming center on days where it's just inclement or it's cold, we have it now, and it's actually open today for the first time, and it's operating where it's for adults, and it's something where we're allowed serving of food as well as housing. We also have been working with different community-based organizations such as Abode on some of the family-based resource, and then also with a lot of our businesses and community members in stepping up. It is a hard discussion because I think sometimes people fear what they don't know, and it's important for us to educate and communicate what is the real needs and who are the people that are homeless.
Well, Pastor Spencer, do you see enough compassion? I mean, who are the people? Because I think people could have a misconception out there.
Yeah, absolutely. The people that are seen most frequently as homeless are the people that are living in extreme situations that maybe have multiple diagnoses that they're coping with, and they tend to be the folk that are, that is a stereotype that we carry about when we say a homeless person. The reality is that homelessness cuts across vast swaths of people, that you can have the vet who is dealing with medical conditions after service, who's homeless and can't find housing for lots of reasons. It could be the family that had a medical crisis, and so the second breadwinner lost their job, they can't make rent anymore, and suddenly they're homeless. Mm-hmm. It can be the 18-year-old who ages out of the foster care system. And so one of the things that the mayor didn't mention that the city is doing is looking at how to partner with faith communities to provide additional shelter for people living on the street with a permitting program for small groups being able to be housed in faith communities. And that, I'm not aware of any other communities in the Bay Area that are reaching out in that way.
All right, thank you so much. I think due to time and time only, we have to move on to our next panel and next topic. However, we can certainly continue this conversation in the days ahead through more stories and also through social media. Was there anybody that had a question that they really wanted to ask relating to the issues that we talked about just now? Do we have the time for that? Yes, gentlemen, the gentleman in the red hat, if you could kindly... If you could state your name, please. And
my name is Salim Hassan, and first of all, thank you very much for coming to Fremont. We really appreciate it. If there is anything that we can do for ABC, we certainly would do it.
Just watch us. Thank you.
The city of Fremont is based on 4 F's: futuristic, fantastic, flow through, and the 4th one is, I forgot, but I'll tell you.
It's okay.
Okay. The flow through means that people working in Silicon Valley go to Tracy and all those places, and we are a flow through town. To stop that, we need to do 3 things. Number 1, have movable dividers on the freeways, 680, 580, 880, 101. That means traffic going in one way can have 8 lanes, and the traffic that is not going on in the other side can have 2 lanes. The dividers can be movable, they can move up and down, So you put in extra lanes to save on the commute time of the people. The third thing is we need a high-speed train from Fremont to Tracy, or trains which move at a very rapid speed like in Tokyo and China. That would help save it. And the next topic that you took upon was the homeless shelter, homeless people. I have made multiple videos on the homeless people here living in Fremont, and like the pastor said, people get into hard times. I am appealing to everybody to join me in making a 600-room homeless shelter on Fremont on Auto Mall. There are $5 billion available from Apple, Google, Facebook, all these companies, and matching funds. If we can have those monies utilized in building near the dump, there are 3 sites, PG&E, the dump, and city-owned land, where the biggest issue of Fremont was when we had these navigation centers, everybody said, not in my backyard. Nobody came to the city hall meetings in the number that came to protest against the homeless shelter people, because, like you said, people do not understand homelessness, what affects and what it happens. But the city council and the mayor, I am approaching them, they are helping. God bless you, and we will do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted just to close on one piece for this discussion. We did say for our council, and I appreciate that it was unanimous, that yes, in my backyard, yes, behind City Hall, and that we also are offering another program, which I think it's important for us to highlight, which is the Mobile Hygiene Clinic. It allows us to be able to travel throughout the city at different faith-based meal services, and allows people the dignity of a clean shower, and it's called Clean Start, and it also allows them to do laundry services.
Okay.
So those are just some of the things that we are working on resource-wise. So thank you.
All right, we look forward to reporting on your solutions. Dan, I know we didn't have enough time in this panel to talk about how to meet those housing stock needs. I know you have big plans, and you welcome community input. And Sanjeev, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Pastor Spencer, thank you very much. We're now going to move on to a next topic, which is better business, which we would like to introduce with a video.
Business means innovation.
Where better to look than in your own backyard for some of the solutions to your own sustainability questions or challenges?
Collaboration. It's starting from scratch and helps our communities thrive.
We want to be as nimble and as entrepreneurial as the next startup in Silicon Valley.
Let's talk about how Fremont is building better business.
All right, better business is a lot of things. It's job creation. It's ensuring that jobs are created at multiple tiers, if you will, and supporting a stable community and sustaining a vibrant downtown, what's becoming the downtown in this large city that started as 5 distinct districts. So we're going to tackle all that, and we have 3 new panelists joining us. Of course, the mayor and vice mayor are still here, but we also have Jens Vogel, who is with, I practiced this, but I knew I might get this wrong now, Boehringer Ingelheim. Oh, thank you very much. A pharmaceutical R&D company based here. And also we have Kimberly Hartz, Washington Hospital, which you're playing host today, so thank you so very much. And this is a huge employer in the city of Fremont with, do you have 1,500 employees here? Over 2,000. Okay, thank you for your participation here. We have Christina Briggs with the city of Fremont in economic development. So thank you so much for joining us. And Jasmine Basrai, who is the CEO of Haller's Pharmacy, which is a staple here in the city of Fremont, representing the vibrant small business community here. Thank you all for joining us. All right, I'm going to throw it out there. Why do you think this is a great place to do business? Who wants to start?
I'm happy to start. So I'm Jens Vogel. I'm the head of BI Fremont, which is actually a part of a global network of biopharmaceutical sites. And of course, when you look at this area, this is the birthplace of biotech. That's where it all started. And so for us, that's an important reason to be here, because our expertise is really in advanced manufacturing. And we are not only working on our own new complex biological therapies for cancer and other indications, but we also help other companies develop and manufacture their products. And of course, being local here, where a lot of this innovative potential is, we can work with these companies, and they just have to basically cross the bridge, let's say, from South City, or we go up to the Northeast Bay, or even to Pleasanton. All around us are a lot of these biotech companies that we partner with. But in general, though, in more general terms, what I personally really love about the Bay Area, and what I think is its great strength is, and especially Fremont, really, it's the cultural diversity. And I learned that 20 years ago when I came to this country, how powerful that is. And that's something that we can leverage here, because when you look at our Fremont site, for example, it mirrors that. It mirrors Fremont as a whole, which is one of the most culturally diverse cities on the planet. Right?
And you believe that makes for a better workforce?
Absolutely, because when you really, what I learned early on is when you put together a team of really diverse folks from different cultural backgrounds, different educational backgrounds, gender, different ways of thinking, and you build a true team, and they look at problems from different perspectives, you get much better solutions. And I think that's why this region here is so powerful and so advanced, both in biotech, but also in computer science and pretty much any other high tech.
And I think Fremont has a very educated populace, right? There's some statistic I read, was it 50% with postgraduate degree? Or, yes. Right? That's impressive. Kimberly?
Yeah, I think that for us it's a little bit different, because Washington Hospital was formed by our community in 1948. So Washington didn't choose Fremont. Basically, our community decided that they needed to have care locally. There was only, I think they had to travel, this community traveled 20 miles to receive care, and the local birthing center had closed down. So they wanted to have high quality and access to care locally. So they decided to form what we call our healthcare district. And we have grown with this community. And I think it's a very important point that our healthcare system really mirrors this community too. And it has really been part of our strength and our success. And that has been very important to us. And really our success is that we are relevant to this community. So we are here to meet the healthcare needs of this community, and that's where our roots are. And so we mirror that, but we also feel that we've got to stay relevant. And so for us, it's really looking at what those healthcare needs are and how can we help to improve healthcare in this community. And I think the other point is we can't do it alone. We can't work in our silos. We all have to work together. The betterment of this community is not for the one or the two of us. It's the responsibility of all of us as community organizations to work together for the betterment of this community.
And Christina, I know you've worked hard as Economic Development Director to come up with reasons for companies to want to do business here. I know the city went through a transition from manufacturing and plants to more high tech, and when NUMMI shut down, it's like, what are we going to do with that space, and how are we going to fill those jobs?
Solero.
Right? So can you talk a little bit about what's worked?
Yeah, I mean, I think in many ways, I like to say the story sells itself in Fremont. I mean, sort of what part of Jens was talking about, you know, this advanced manufacturing environment really includes such a broad array of companies and of jobs and other types of assets that it forms this entire ecosystem around tech manufacturing. And so in addition to some of the geographic advantages and the diversity like he was mentioning, you know, there's this ecosystem or clustering effect of companies that need to be near their suppliers, or there's other types of business relationships. And so I think that is really at the core of its strength, particularly when you are in a kind of a hardware or manufacturing kind of economy. That matters a lot, right? That is the companies and the businesses are depending on that kind of interaction day in and day out. But beyond that, to your earlier point about, you know, coming a long way, you know, the city has been extremely resilient, bold in making some very strong decisions around what to do in the face of change, and in terms of industry change, in terms of economy change. And so out of that has, born some pretty fantastic things that are happening in the Warm Springs Innovation District particularly. So it's a really strong story.
How's it working with small businesses?
I would say, Fremont still has a small town feel. So if you go around Fremont and you ask them, do you know Haller's Pharmacy, for example? They'll know because they've had a story. Just even one here today. I came to Haller's and I got really good care. It's been around the community. I remember when you were down the street, and it's just like with Washington Hospital. We came out of a need, and we're the third owners, and it feels like Fremont still wants that. Fremont still wants small business. They want to have somebody to come and talk to. We talked about earlier the aging population. They need a place to go. In some senses, their local pharmacy, their local caretakers, they come and visit the pharmacy. They expect to see the same faces, and they want to see Haller's there. They want to see a small business where they can relate to and know the people, and they're people who live in the community. It's not somebody who's coming from far away. It's, hey, my neighbor works at this store. My neighbor has a job in Fremont.
It's going to be able to maintain that?
It's harder and harder.
It's going to be harder because Fremont used to be almost it was out there by itself, and it was a satellite of Silicon Valley. Now it's going to become, in the next 10 years, it's going to be the hub. It's going to be the turning point because. Did you notice last year that Stockton Airport wanted to change its designation to Stockton SF Airport, regional? Everybody laughed at that, saying, "Why would you? What is that?" Well, the reason was that is because not for commercial flights for you flying off to Hawaii, but for freight. That as the bridges become more impacted, that Fremont and San Ramon are going to be the places to ship in out of Stockton, going that way to Tracy. So how do you continue to be small business or mid-sized business when there's going to be a huge rush for everything you've got?
Well, I was going to note that we are very fortunate in Fremont to have the Chamber of Commerce as well as neighborhood business districts. And in fact, it's ironic that you're asking this question. We are going through an update soon of our goals, and as a council, we look at some of the values that we believe in. And this last year, we particularly highlighted small neighborhood businesses. So it's working with organizations like Small Business Development, where we are partnering on programs that allow the community to be able to come in and start their innovative processes, whether it's something as manufacturing the first of a component and having the ability to scale out, as well as the ability to be able to license these. These are some of the things that make our city special. Also, the charm that makes Fremont a good place to call home are things like Niles with their business districts and their antique festivals and their local Charlie Chaplin days. You mentioned our history. Centerville with their business districts and the Artist Walk that we're creating there. So and Mission San Jose. So each of them have distinct characteristics, and that's what made me choose originally Fremont as a home, is that I can walk through different parts of the town. I can embrace the different history and the cultures. Everything from our Museum of Local History, just during the Halloween time period, I got to spend my morning touring the cemetery. And you're thinking, okay, what would you walk through the cemetery? And you get to see the pioneers, where it all started.
I'm curious, though, if from a business perspective, whether it's a large business such as Washington Hospital or, Boehringer, or even for Haller's, a small business, is it difficult hiring people to work for you? Can you talk about the challenges there? Because, the cost of living is high.
The commute.
Right? The commute is challenging, yeah.
Yeah, and it is very difficult. The cost of living is very high. We're trying to bring in employees from all over, and it's very hard to recruit. And I think Jasmine, you touched on something that's really important that we have to find ways to focus on, and that is to have long-term employees and to ensure that people want to come here. We have multiple generations of nurses and physicians working here. We gave out a 50-year pin the other day, or last year, to one of our employees, And those are the things that make it special to be here at Washington or here in this area. That still has that sort of hometown feel, and we've got to work on ways to not lose that. And that's the challenge that we have in this community now, with the cost of living, the housing issues. We have people coming over from the Altamont Pass. It is really difficult, and we have to figure out ways that we can look at growing our own. And that's really, we offer a lot of programs where they can train on the job. So if they are assistant and they want to become a nurse, we'll help them to go back to school to do that. So we're looking at innovative ways to either partner with Ohlone College to get additional training so they don't leave the community and go someplace else. So we as a business have to look at different ways that we can help to promote our own workforce, and they look at ways that it makes a difference to come and work for us.
And what I would add to that is, we talk a lot about affordable housing. We want workforce housing. We talk about teachers and the fire departments and people who are protecting us to be able to live in the communities. But like we said, the pharmacist, the person who's, my dad used to get up in the middle of the night to open the pharmacy if he got a phone call because he lived here and he could do that. And so that's what the community is looking for, is the people who are helping you and serving you. They are also living here in the communities. And just like Kimberly said, what we're trying to do at Howlers that started to be innovative is a lot of mid-wage employees don't have savings. So we work with them. We're probably one of the first that offered them livable 401ks so that they could do those bigger purchases, because we can't be providing them all of the opportunities with great, health care. We can't afford some of those services, but we can teach them to be smarter with their money so that they can find affordable solutions for them.
I think maybe just for emphasis, not really new points, but I think for us, we've been reasonably successful in terms of hiring and growing. So we started out about 350 people. Now we are at 700 over a very short period of time. We've been expanding a lot. And part of it is, of course, telling a compelling growth story and having a vision of what you want to build and create. But I agree with you. I think it's harder, certainly, and it's going to be even harder to attract people from far away that don't already live here. And actually, in a way, that is okay, because we should develop the local talent, which is already so rich. Mm-hmm. And so from that perspective, we are thinking along the same lines in terms of partnering with Ohlone and other local universities and education centers to really develop the next generation talent, and all cross-board. I mean, one of the things that for us we can maybe also bring to the community is that we have a whole range of jobs. Since we do advanced manufacturing, it's everything from operators on the floor and the cleaning crews all the way to the PhDs that develop new technologies. Mm-hmm. And so it's a broad spectrum.
What % of your workforce lives in Fremont?
I can't give you the exact number, but it's certainly a significant percentage of people that live
more
around
than
the
half?
area. Probably like 30%, 40%.
But 1 out of 3 lives here, 2 out of 3 commutes. At the hospital, what do you think the percentage is?
I'm not exactly sure. We're less than 50%, and it has changed over time.
Gone up or down?
It's gone down.
Gone down. So fewer people live here.
Yes.
And at the pharmacy, how many?
I would say about 60%.
Live here?
Yeah, they live here because there's multi-generational families. A lot of them are living at home with their parents because that's the kind of jobs that we offer. We do have a few commuting in, but it's too expensive to commute too.
I was going to say, how important is it to have not just transitory people, in the sense that the people who live here are going to spend money here on the small businesses, right? So how do you ensure, what kind of things can you develop in the city to make sure that people are spending their money here? Like, even if you're like a Facebook employee, or let's say you're not even a Fremont resident, but what are you going to bring in to entice them to shop and support the Howlers and the other small businesses?
Well, I think we definitely want people that come to Fremont to shop in Fremont, and so we're trying to create retail centers. Matter of fact, we have Pacific Commons, which is the largest power center in the West Coast, and it generates over half of our sales tax in Fremont. And we have in Centerville, we have lots of businesses, especially small businesses that bring in a lot of business. And so our goal is to try to get those businesses acquainted with the local retail and restaurant options, so that when they come to Fremont, that they can shop locally.
All right. Well, my colleague Phil Mateer has to take off, right?
No, just step outside for a minute.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going
All
to
right, great.
step outside.
All right, we'll
Unless
continue
you
the
don't like to
conversation.
make broadcast history and be on KCBS.
If you like to, please join Phil outside. I'm just kidding. All right, so you'll be back. Excellent. That's fantastic because you guys have like great restaurants and shops here, right? And with the development of the downtown, I know Town Plaza Fair, very
Town Fair
successful,
Plaza.
the shopping
Fair
area,
Plaza,
right?
yes.
And now you're going to develop that into a permanent downtown, which is something that probably has everybody very excited.
Yeah, and one of the benefits is we have some great restaurants, especially different diverse
Yeah.
restaurants. So we have the best of everything. So the downtown is a great vision for our Fremont. Is finally, after 50 years, we're creating this new downtown out of scratch.
Yeah.
And it brings all the folks together from all of our historic districts. So our goal is to have, kind of like restaurants, retail, and nightlife, and entertainment. So it's a great place.
All right. Well, that concludes our Better Business portion. I think you've got a lot to consider there, and certainly sounds like many opportunities. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you have more questions, I think our panelists will remain here. Yes, and please do know that we were going to develop more stories in the future based on the things that you guys are trying out and experimenting with and implementing. So we look forward to continuing to learning from you. Now, we don't have any questions at the moment with regard to Better Business, so we're going to move on to our next portion, which is Better Living. So please check out our short video. Thank you so much.
Community is more than your neighbors and friends.
Fremont's in my blood. I'm not going anywhere else.
It's who has your back.
We're looking to try to enhance the service that we can provide to the community.
It's diverse.
Wherever I go,
inclusive.
I come across my students.
And full of hope for the future.
We place a very heavy emphasis on education, and that's something that I really appreciate.
Let's talk about how Fremont is building better community.
All right, for Building a Better Community, we have some new panelists joining us. We have Captain Sean Washington with the Fremont Police Department stepping in for Chief Peterson today, who's not feeling too well. Right? Please give her our regards, and hopefully she'll get better soon. And we have Karen Lee, who's a student at Mission San Jose High School, very active in the community. Thanks for joining us and representing some of the viewpoints of the younger generation here in Fremont. And we have Moina Sheikh, who is also with the Tri-City Interfaith Council and started something really unique called Meet a Muslim, which we want to hear all about coming up. So thank you for joining us all today. Fremont is known for having an amazing community, and when I asked the panelists, what do you love most, and I think the word diversity really came up. Just looking at our panelists, you can tell, and just looking at our audience. Give us the breakdown demographically. It's 50% Asian, right? 33% white, 14% Hispanic, 3% black. So, and within Asian, it's not just this monolithic group. You have Indians, Chinese, Pakistani, Afghans, Japanese. If I left you out, I'm so sorry. It's right. It's Filipino. It's just so rich. It's a microcosm of the Bay Area, if you will. Tell us how that has made living here to you more special and more meaningful, to have that interaction with so many different groups. And the thing is, I'm shocked, but everybody says we all get along, and it's not just a PR thing. We all get along. How are you doing it?
So I chose Fremont. I moved here 37 years ago. Back then, it was not as diverse as it is today, but this is the best thing for a person of color like myself, a Muslim woman, to raise my family here. Because of its diversity, people are so inclusive. They're so open and welcoming, friendly, and that's what you need. You don't want to live in a community where you don't feel belonged. Mm-hmm. I completely feel belonged here.
That was echoed by everybody, and I thought, is this utopia? Right? Everybody does seem to really enjoy learning from each other.
Yeah, so I remember when I was a kid, I was the only Indian American in my class. And so when they were talking about Native Americans, we used to call them Indian Americans back then. And they were like, oh yeah, Raj Salman would know. And I'm like, no, that's a different kind of Indian. We're from South Asia. And back then they were looking at me like, what is the guy talking about? And now it's like there's Indian Americans everywhere. You look at all the schools and all of Fremont, it's changed so much. And I think Part of it is just that the folks here have been very accepting of immigrants. They've been very, I won't say tolerant, but they actually celebrate immigrants. And particularly the education institutions have been very helpful because Fremont's relatively a safe city. We've got great parks, great education, and a good melting pot where people work well together. And I think the city administration and all the folks that live here have created that. And I think it's getting better and better, and I think it'll continue to grow.
I mean, and it sounds like the police department has really done a great job as well in terms of understanding the community, right? Because when you do have so many diverse threads, it's not easy learning the cultures of the people you serve. And knowing that is important to build trust. Can you talk about what things you have done in the department to improve that trust and understanding so that, you know, when people have a problem, they say, hey, we will call the police. They're here to help us.
Absolutely. Well, it starts with respect and trust and legitimacy. And so our police department, we pride ourselves in preparing our officers to police this very diverse and wonderful community. Fremont's a special place, and we know that. So it starts with, the formal training for sure, what the officers get in the academy regarding respecting and honoring that diverse population that we serve. Then it goes beyond that. Once they get to Fremont, we do have in-house training, but it even goes beyond that. It really has to do with our commitment to engaging with the community. So to understand the community, you have to get out into the community, and you have to participate in community groups and meetings and those sorts of things. So through our community engagement unit, we really pride ourselves on listening. And you can only listen if you engage with the community, understand the diversity in beliefs, thoughts, experiences, all those sorts of things come into play. So going back to who we hire as well, that's important. We have to hire the right people who understand what we're trying to accomplish here in this city. And it has to do with respect and policing this fine community in a very legitimate way and honoring every person.
And I know you listen to people, right? And I think you have been a partner to the police in terms of educating them on some cultural norms and tendencies.
Right. So I remember when the hands-free law came into effect, I called our police chief because for a Muslim woman, especially wearing a hijab, you cannot put that earpiece in your ear. You know, how will we be hands-free? And back then, the cars didn't have those Bluetooth technology. I mean, some cars probably did, but now it's everywhere. Yeah. So I called our police chief and I said, you know what? If you see a Muslim woman in a hijab with her phone stuck in her hijab, please let your officers know that she's hands-free, but that's the only way she can use the phone. And within minutes, he sent an email. He BCC'd me on it to his patrol officers to let them know that this is something, you know, to be aware of. So that was very big and important for my community.
And even the way you might enter a home or approach a subject,
Yes.
I mean, that requires cultural sensitivity and training, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to getting a better understanding of the community that we serve, because there are certain cultures and customs that if you don't understand, you know, there could be a reaction that is not positive, right, for the community. So those type of things are very important. And again, we try to reach out, like you reached out to the police chief, and be more understanding of some of those things. And it helps us. It helps our officers police the community in a very responsible way.
And in fact, after 9/11, the police chief came to our mosque and he said, in case of emergency, if our officers have to come into the mosque because we don't wear shoes, how are they going to? They won't have time to take off their shoes. How are they going to run into the prayer area? And we came up with a solution to put on those covers that, you know, hospitals use and places like that. So they reached out to us and to see how they can serve us well. Yeah.
One of the key areas that I think that makes our city be able to have that understanding is that I know our police didn't mention it, but we also have a Building Bridges program where we have visited every single one of our public 6th grade. And it's been so popular program. We're going on our 3rd year because we want the community and our students and their families to feel like it's not just some situation where you're an emergency, but it's part of everyday life, that we're there to serve, whether it's our police or our fire, that we're out there as members of the community, as ambassadors, to allow people to know that we care about their quality of life and how we can engage them on a regular basis. So there's a lack of fear. There's a more of an understanding that we are partners in this.
And I just wanted to add, after 9/11, there were a lot of folks targeted, especially the Sikh Americans, because they're the most visible. And our police chief and our police went to the local Gurdwara, and they worked with the community and they, what the process should be, how they should handle these situations in the future, and make sure the community felt safe and welcome, and also made statements that they are against hate crimes. So that really comforted our community.
You know, I was going to say, Captain Washington, having the community's backing and trust, does that make it easier for you to recruit officers? Because I know it's competitive out there getting new recruits.
Absolutely. I truly believe that this is a special community that supports their police. In fact, one of the things that I really appreciate about our police agency and our city as a whole is the use of technology, right? We're in the heart of the region that really promotes technology. And it all goes back to trust and legitimacy once again. We're able to solve crimes, respond to crimes in a more efficient way because our community trusts that we're going to use technology in a very responsible way. So things like cameras, drones, those type of things, we've reached out to the community and received feedback from that, and they really do trust us to do the right thing with that. The other thing about technology is that it does help us engage with the community. We are on community chat groups, we are on community social media platforms, and we're able to reach over 200,000 of our residents here with the click of a button. So technology plays a very big part in us being able to recruit officers and retain officers here in this fine city.
Fremont, you know, is an interesting area. It's sort of the one of the few places in the Bay Area, or even in California, that was leapfrogged over the 60s and 70s. Sort of went from the 50s to the 80s. It went from a little sleepy town to all this money coming in and all these people coming in, and a lot of the you don't have necessarily the downtown that others have. You don't have. Is there a bad part of Fremont? Is there a tough part of Fremont? So is there a warehouse district that's sort of run down and questionable? No, like I said, you jumped over all that, and now you're here. You're pretty lucky.
I will say, one thing that some of you have pointed out to me as a challenge, though, is that while you talk about the harmony, if you will, unity among different religions and ethnic backgrounds, you do sense some tension between people of socioeconomic differences in different classes or different income levels. Can you talk a little bit about how that is playing out here and how you think Fremont can take that challenge on? And Karen, I know you have some thoughts about that because you actually listed socioeconomic discrimination as one of the things that you think young people can help fight.
Yeah, I think something that Fremont has done well is being inclusive. Going back to the socioeconomic kind of status that we're seeing, a lot of communities where you have a very homogeneous or very same status of economic because of the housing prices around that area is all the same. So to be able to live in that area and attend the school in that area, you have to have that kind of status. And just making that more various creates a less of a bubble community and more of an inclusive community. But I do think Fremont in general is a very proactive community and something that we really appreciate, especially during board meetings. I was actually talking to a fellow student board member in a different district, and she was saying how her board meetings end around 9 p.m., or we have board meetings ending around 12 a.m., 1 a.m. And I'm saying that the prolonged meetings don't just show effort from the board side, but also from the entire community. We're seeing teachers, we're seeing staff, we're seeing students coming out and speaking. And that's what makes Fremont special, is that we have people who care, who are willing to take time out of their daily lives to come and voice their opinion. And this includes the division, and bringing awareness to that division is important. And having those late night meetings make it worth it when people are saying that, hey, we know you're dedicating your time, we're also dedicating our time. So just having that and being inclusive as a student population, as a city population, really makes it really special living here and being part of this community.
Kira, we do have a question for you, actually,
Yes.
from the audience. Okay, so the person says, you know, activism in Fremont, especially from young people like you, has really made all the difference, that you know, young people, maybe you, led in LGBTQ acceptance for curriculum on school board meetings, right? The one you were talking about going till 2 a.m. probably. And young people led to the rejection of Jewel, again, that meeting, right? But how do you navigate that stressful path between conservative elements and modern California?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of different opinions. So being part of the board, one thing you see is a lot of different opinions, especially on education. And one thing to keep in mind is that you have to be very open-minded to what people want, because everyone's going to have some kind of perspective on this. There's the more conservative, there's the more, like you said, modern kind of thinking. And taking that all in creates a multidimensional perspective on the issue we're talking about. So to be able to come to a compromise and a solution together is more important than remaining divided on the same solution and refusing to move, refusing to come to a compromise. And I think that's something that, again, coming to voice your opinion, even if you don't agree with that opinion, it helps everyone come together to a compromise. That's what's really important, is being able to say, I understand your side and I have my opinion, but if we meet in the middle ground, we can help both sides move together and move forward on this situation, rather than just staying put and saying, I'm not going to be willing to be open-minded to you. So just having that ability to compromise as a community has been really successful on any curriculum changes, on any issues that we're discussing during board meetings.
I was going to say that that's one of the things that we see when it comes to these topics that we've covered today, whether it's traffic, housing, or plans, is that we're going to see a diversity of opinions. What I think is important for us to be able to function well is to be able to look at people over politics, and to be able to look at how we recognize it's important to have respect for one another, and to be able to respectfully disagree sometimes on these discussions, and to be able to have the courage to listen to one another and to consider different people's perspectives.
Yeah, I think we're more polarized at this time than ever I've ever seen, and I think people have two different videos they're watching. You know, one view is very conservative and one is very liberal, and I think that also reflects the larger media that we have. People don't want to come to terms. We have more ideologues, less likely to compromise. Compromise is a bad word for some folks nowadays. You know, in the old days, politics was you work together, you try to find the common good, it's a give and take, and you try to solve the problems. Yeah. But now it's more about trying to get sound bites, trying to look like the worst of the the extreme lefts and rights, and just try to create issues and not really fix the dirty work, which is working together, finding a solution, and then trying to get buy-in from the community. And I think that's what's missing in America and in our area as well. And I think we need to turn that around to get.
So Fremont's not immune.
Fremont's not immune. We have a lot of extreme opinions sometimes. It shocks me sometimes that these are my neighbors, our residents, and this is how they believe, And so I think that empathy is missing lately. I don't know why, but somebody's feeling like they're not getting something. And so I think that's a larger issue we also need to address.
Well, empathy starts with understanding. So maybe in addition to meet a Muslim, this conversation's one we can extend to meet a police officer, meet a city council member, meet a, what have you. But I think it starts with conversations.
In fact, there's a new concept called human library, where instead of borrowing a book from a library, you borrow a human. You don't take that human home. You read that human at the library.
Okay.
And I have gone to several of their events, and there have been police officers, there have been LGBTQ, there have been people from all walks of life, to educate others about, their perspective, because everybody's different, and it's hard to know what's all out there.
That's nice. The nice thing about kind of reaching out and getting out into your neighborhood. We have a lot of also local events. You were asking earlier what allows us to gather one another. We have the Festival of the Arts. We have the Festival of India. We have the Niles Festival of Lights. And these types of gatherings allow us to walk through and get to know one another in a more personal level. And so rather than being remote, it allows us that human contact, which is, I think, what makes Fremont special.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We do have a few questions from the audience. Phil, would you like to get us started with question number 1?
Okay. Let me see. Oh, this is interesting. Now, this is for the mayor. Why do they always pick the mayor?
The buck stops here.
It starts there, too. One question is that We talk about a lot of special districts in the area, and how are you going to preserve them? And those elements of the city, when the goal is to be strategically urban, because that word in there is urban, and you're reaching the limits of your land, and now you got to start turning in. So how do you keep Fremont being Fremont when you're on your way to being San Jose?
Well, I don't think we want to be San Jose. I think we want to be
that's
Fremont.
News. Did you get that?
We want to be Fremont.
That's
We're proud of who we are. But I think how do we keep that is that we work with our council members. One of the things that you may not have been aware of, and you didn't cite earlier probably, is that we, a couple years ago, went through a big change. 2 years ago, we went from being elected at large to being district elections. And having a council member who is then elected within the community allows people who perhaps may have not been able to run before and to be a close personal contact. And that gives one perspective. But then you realize how, when we're looking at these issues, whether it's schools, housing, or plans on traffic, it's something that we have to work together as a council, as a city, and also within a part of the region with our neighbors. So it's allowing us to balance those two perspectives. How do we keep some of those characteristics is also when it comes to our general plans, when it comes to how we're allocating things like our parks, that we incorporate some of these unique characteristics. When we've looked at some of the plans that have come through and we talked about housing, or we're looking at the community center, I'm looking for ways that we're not just going to have sterile white walls, that we can bring in some of the culture and the heritage that keeps us who we are. And to be able to share that with the next generation is important. It's important for us to know where we've been and where we want to go. And this gives us the guide and the roadmap for some of the history.
All right, we have time for one last question, and it's going to be, is there a place or way to build workforce housing? Can we reduce land used for parking, for example? Want to tackle that?
You want to talk about it, or I can talk about it?
Okay, all right.
So there is ways that we're looking at workforce housing. It's sometimes repurposing some of the housing that we have. A good example is here in Fremont, we have the Islander Motel, and it's a property where it has been a little bit more worn, and we're in the process of utilizing it for a shelter as well as to repurpose and build additional housing there. So therefore, we're looking at property that may have not been utilized to the best of its maximum and trying to create ways that it's affordable, that addresses some of the needs. And when we're going through the different housing elements, as we're looking at what's being built, we are trying to balance that in terms of we've built more than enough market rate housing. We've actually made great inroads right now on low and very low income. And now we're looking at ways that we as a city, as political leaders, can work with our legislators on workforce housing and also working with our businesses, because we realize that all the different employees need to have a place to call home. It's not just the people that are the technology workers, and it's not just people who can live with their parents. We want to be able to have affordability and the option to be able to choose Fremont.
You can always include the young people, Karen, and your
Yes.
Classmates involved in that conversation as a project. I'm sure you will come up with excellent ideas. I know how great the schools are and how smart and amazing and hardworking the students are. Certainly one of the reasons why people come here, for the fabulous schools. Thank you so very much. We're going to end the conversation here for now, but know that it does continue. It continues via many platforms, social. You can go back there and record a message for us. We got it all ready to go, and some of the panelists will still stick around to answer additional questions in chat. Thank you for coming. We can't wait to develop more stories around some of the issues we heard here. And if you have story ideas, please feel free to write it down on a piece of paper there before you leave. We also welcome nominations of people for ABC 7 Stars. That is an initiative we have in which we honor the people who have made an impact in their community, and we do stories on them. So you can go ahead and do that as well. And finally, our news director, Tracy Walkowski, will
I just want to say thank you to everybody. Kristen, Phil Mateer, everybody on the panel. This is like amazing. I'm sitting back here going, oh my gosh, this is such a great first town hall. So thank you. Any of us with ABC 7 tags on, if you have story ideas, please come talk to us. I do have one question from Larry Beal. On Friday night, he came in, he said, when you go to Fremont on Monday, find out if someone lives in Fremont, what are they called? Are they a Fremonter, a Fremontonian?
I would say Fremontonian.
Fremontonian. Okay, great. That's good. I will answer Larry's question. So anyway, no, thank you, and we really appreciate all your input, and we're looking forward to doing more stories in your community. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you.
Actually, so I was going to say earlier, with the hospital, my two best MIF made in Fremont products are 22 and 18.
You are doing a great job too. Yeah.
They are. We always say Fremont. That's what we usually call them.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm going to turn off our mics just to Christy. Yeah. Sure. Hi, how's it going? Thank you so